Yeah, the thing I find most tricky is when people don't recognize you particularly, but half recognize.
And Richard Curtis, the screenwriter.
Sure.
And we'd been working on a sketch show called Not the 9 O'Clock News in England.
Before the world knew him as Mr. Bean, Rowan Atkinson was a quiet farm boy who could barely speak without stuttering. Bullied, isolated, and written off by classmates, no one imagined he would one day become a global icon. But the moment he stepped on stage, something unbelievable happened. The stutter that controlled his life vanished.
Than most of the characters that I play, who tend to be very selfish or self-centered or self-obsessed in some way, particularly Mr. Bean.
This is the story of how a boy who struggled to speak became one of the greatest silent comedians in history. He is now 70 years old and is opening up about how his childhood tragedy affected his life. At long last, the mute comic was able to share his tale. When a stutter met the stage and lost. The little English town of Consett is the site of Rowan Sebastian Atkinson's birth on January 6, 1955. Out of 4 boys, he was the youngest. Nevertheless, a tragic event transpired prior to his reaching the age of memory. He has only 3 brothers after his eldest brother Paul passed away while he was a newborn. Rodney, an economist and a brother of Rowan's, came close to becoming the head of the UK Independence Party in the year 2000. Rowan had a peaceful and regimented childhood on a farm. But here's the irony. He would eventually become famous for his outrageous and comical character portrayals. A severe stammer began when Rowan was about 5 years old. He had difficulty communicating in class because of his speech impediment. The Durham Corley School was his alma mater. The bullying at that school was quite brutal. Rowan was a timid young man with a rubbery face and a speech impediment, according to employee Canon John Grove. Even his fellow students have said that he resembles an extraterrestrial. Because of their mockery of his appearance and speech, Rowan spent much of his time alone. Tony Blair, who would go on to become Prime Minister, was a student there. Being 2 years younger, Tony recalled how difficult things were for Rowan. An article from 2007 in The Independent highlighted the severe bullying that occurred. When Rowan took the stage, though, an odd thing occurred. His stutter would vanish entirely. There would be absolutely no problem with his performance. The secret to his talent was that traumatic event from his youth. Rowan excelled academically despite the bullying. He was accepted to Newcastle University in 1973 at the tender age of 18 thanks to his exceptional performance in science A-levels. Electrical and computer engineering were his areas of study. He was expected to pursue a career in science or engineering, not comedy, according to many around him. He was 20 years old when he graduated in 1975. Subsequently, he continued a family tradition by enrolling at Queen's College, Oxford. For a highly intricate topic, self-tuning control systems were the center of his Master of Science degree. A PhD program was even initiated by him, although I did not complete it. He sensed a force drawing him away from the path he had been following. Chris Robson, Rowan's teacher, once remarked that he was average student. He changed completely as soon as he took the stage. At that point, the true change started to take place. Rowan became a member of the Oxford University Acting Club and a review group known as the At This Period. He crossed paths with Richard Curtis, a young writer. He would never be the same after this encounter. Their lives would be forever altered by it. While enrolled as a master's student at Oxford University, in 1975, Rowan formally began studying electrical. He published his thesis in 1978 after much investigation. However, his acting time increased. Things become more complicated due to the difference between engineering and comedy. But his technical training never left him. A number of years down the road, he'd be among the first famous people to purchase an electric vehicle. 9 years prior to 2023, he purchased his first entirely electric vehicle, and 18 years prior to that, he purchased his first hybrid. He also shared his thoughts on the environmental impact of electric car technology, drawing on his extensive understanding in the field. However, is this not enough? It was obvious that comedy was his real passion. He felt at home in the theater, a childhood stutter, a lifetime of silence. Then one performance changed everything. His first big moment. His 1979 creation of BBC Radio 3's The Atkinson People was his first major break. Many literary characters, including French philosopher Georges Dupont and Sir Corin Bazin, were portrayed by him. Griff Rhys-Jones oversaw production, while Richard Curtis contributed to the writing. The show didn't get many listeners despite being clever and humorous. Few people heard it because it ran in a slot that wasn't designed for comedic content. Even so, his detractors couldn't deny his talent. Similar to Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, it was recorded in stereo. It may not have catapulted Rowan to stardom, but it did prove he was prepared for greater things. Things were rough from 1978 until 1979. On multiple occasions, the BBC turned him down. He was a comedian, but they missed the point. He was discouraged and disoriented. Things were already challenging, and his stutter became significantly worse during the audition and interview processes. He considered returning to engineering instead of comedy for a while. But then a pivotal event occurred. His stutter disappeared whenever he stepped into character, he noticed. He was empowered by the revelation. He could be himself without worrying about sounding flawless. He might delegate speech-making to the characters. Friends from his time at Oxford, such as Angus Dee and Damien Layton, remained collaborators with Rowan. On the radio, they would perform together, with Angus frequently taking on the role of the serious straight man. This allowed Rowan's untamed characteristics to truly show. Angus went on to guest star in Mr. Bean and Blackadder. Even though TV was still turning him down, their collaboration boosted his self-esteem. Without the constant scrutiny of the camera, he was able to blossom. Rowan returned to the Edinburgh Fringe Festival in 1979. He had reached the age of 24. At the brand-new Wireworks Theatre, he was even spotted clearing debris and constructing the stage. Like a classic Buster Keaton film, his show was largely silent. Others noticed something unique, while others just didn't grasp it and left. Unlike most comedians, he made excellent use of his physique and face. Thanks to that performance, he was able to meet influential people in the business world. As early as 1980, he resumed his pursuit of television. In 1979, he made a pilot for television called Canned Laughter. Among his many roles was an early iteration of Mr. Bean. Despite its cleverness, the show was not picked up for a series. Even more nerve-wracking was the fact that his stammer reappeared during multiple auditions, but he started to figure out a way to win. He gave his all to the roles he played. At the age of 25, he had perfected the art of performing around his stutter by the time he made an appearance on Wogan in 1980. Thereafter, the fight came to a close. They mocked him, called him an alien, but what they saw as weakness hid a genius in disguise. The moment his life changed forever. The world took note of the unusual, shy youngster who had transformed his suffering into joy at that time. The year 1979 was a watershed moment in Rowan Atkinson's life. That was the year that Not the 9 O'Clock News, a new comedy show on the BBC, offered him a chance. The postponement of the show's April air date was due to the general election. There was a period when the BBC worried the show was getting too political. On October 16, 1979, the first episode was eventually shown. However, things were unsuccessful. It was practically unwatched. Only around 100,000 people watched. Plenty of people thought it was terrible. People felt it had no place on television and found it insulting. A future close co-star, Mel Smith, proclaimed it to be the worst half-hour of television he had ever witnessed. However, to everyone's surprise, the BBC controller approved. Instantly, he placed an order for a second series. Because of that choice, the program was rescued and went on to become one of the most influential British comedy series of all time. Famous actors Griff Rhys-Jones, Pamela Stephenson, and Mel Smith were all Rowan's co-workers. There was some friction going on behind the scenes. The 1980 season ended with Chris Langham's dismissal after only one. Rowan was opposed to this. He demonstrated his loyalty by attempting to persuade the producers to retain Chris. Griff Rhys-Jones, however, was still demoted, and Chris removed. Chris avoided all of them for a long time because of how hurtful the consequences were. The BBC also began slashing the show's budget. In an episode titled "The Outrageously Expensive Not the 9 O'Clock News," they even made light of it because of how awful it got. There was a need to reduce minor roles and end filming in more posh locales. It was around this time when Rowan's most serious and fastidious traits began to emerge. The program's tone shifted as well. It shifted its focus from shock humor to more subtle forms of offbeat and witty comedy. Behind closed doors, there were obvious indications of creative differences. The turning point in Rowan's life had arrived. One of the sketches that ran in 1980 was Gerald the Gorilla, which was part of the second season. Gerald, the monkey that Mel Smith played, was supposedly taught by a professor. Gerald, portrayed by Rowan in a gorilla suit, was more angry and intelligent than everyone had anticipated. Gerald became angry and yelled out "Wild!" when the professor claimed to have captured him in 1968 while he was roaming freely. My fury knew no bounds. It was that line that went viral. Since the drawing gained a lot of attention, actual scientists began to mockingly refer to groupings of baboons as a flange, much like in the drawing. At the Montreux Festival, the Silver Rose went to the program because of this episode. Best Light Entertainment Program was another 1982 BAFTA it earned. As a specialist in physical comedy and offbeat humor, Rowan's career took off after that one sketch. It was a stepping stone to his subsequent parts in Mr. Bean and Blackadder. What occurred in 1981 was even more unexpected. A humorous track titled "I Like Trucking" was published by the show as part of their album Hedgehog Sandwich. The music video went viral. Given Rowan's complete lack of musical training, nobody thought she would be included on a top-charting hit. He was, though. In addition to singing it as a quartet, Rowan drove the truck in the skit. His sincerity was palpable. He possessed a valid Class 1 truck license during that period. Because of that one detail, the sketch was even funnier and more realistic. After its successful single release under BBC Records, the song eventually made it onto BBC Collections. That Rowan was more than simply a sketch comic was proven by it. Extra effort would be within his capabilities. His talents extended to singing, acting, driving, and entertaining in other forms. However, a gloomy turn occurred by 1982. In March of that year, the program concluded. There was no correlation to viewership. The reason behind this was because Rowan and the rest of the cast had finally had enough. A state of complete weariness had fallen upon them. The frantic tempo, the intense strain, the script, the performance, the nervousness. I couldn't handle it anymore. Especially Rowan was having trouble. He was already struggling with anxiety, and the amount of work was making him sick. So they abandoned their achievement and decided not to pursue it any further in the hopes of becoming famous or rich. Hollywood was Pamela Stevenson's destination. Beginning in 1983, Rowan dove headfirst into filming Blackadder. The show Alas Smith and Jones was created by Mel Smith and Griff Rhys-Jones. It was unusual for them to decide to leave while they were at the top of their game. Money was not as important to Rowan as his mental health and maintaining his artistic integrity. The launch of Blackadder. The launch of the Blackadder by Rowan occurred on June 15, 1983. That was a crazy plan. Richard Curtis, with whom he had collaborated on Not the 9 O'Clock News, was also a co-creator. If Richard III had triumphed at Bosworth Field, their hypothetical world would look very different. The cunning and ambitious son of King Richard IV, Rowan portrayed Prince Edmund. The production made use of massive sets and costumes photographed at Elmwick Castle. A lot of risk went into the show. Even the Seven Network of Australia contributed financially. As an afterthought, they inserted a joke stating that William Shakespeare contributed additional speech in the credits. The innovative leap came at a high cost, though. After the first season, the BBC almost scrapped the show due to the exorbitant expenditures. The rain continued to hamper the shots. Casting for the castle took forever. The enormous cast lists and period costumes completely broke the budget. The reviews were hardly stellar. Some critics felt it lacked the comedic punch of Rowan's previous works. It was saved by only one thing. The show was awarded the International Emmy. Because of that accolade, the BBC decided to give it another go. On this occasion, however, they were very specific. Castles are out. Big sets are out. A more condensed, less expensive, and more focused season would follow. The fate of the show was forever altered by that choice. Blackadder 2 first aired in 1986. It was all novel. When Ben Elton became a co-writer, he brought quicker gags and better plot points. They choose to concentrate on human moments rather than big-budget cinematic sequences. Rowan was finally able to shine without supporting larger stars like Brian Blessed. He took center stage now. Among the most notable alterations was the cast. The audience fell head over heels for Miranda Richardson's portrayal of Queenie, a squeaky-voiced queen. Tom Baker, who played the iconic role of Redbeard Rum, was only one of many memorable guest stars. Baldrick, who had previously been intelligent, became the endearing dweeb that viewers loved, while Rowan's Edmund became sardonic and perceptive. Some of the fans were first furious. Even a critic dubbed Rowan Wally of the Week once. That being said, popular sentiment shifted with the passage of time. It became clear that this new version was superior. The plot was more complex, the humor was more biting, and the chemistry was spot on. When Blackadder Goes Forth, the last season, debuted in 1989, it became an unexpected hit. The First World War trenches served as the backdrop. Tony Robinson portrayed the role of Private Baldrick, Hugh Laurie was Lieutenant George, and Rowan was Captain Blackadder. The last episodes kept many of the improvised phrases. What they had in the 80s couldn't be replicated, according to Rowan afterward. That was an unforgettable moment. Mr. Bean. Then the big launch of Mr. Bean. On January 1st, 1990, 13,450,000 people tuned in to watch the pilot episode. Rowan had conceived of the persona while enrolled at Oxford University many years ago. His subtle performance as Mr. Bean was well received by viewers all over the world. A total of 245 nations bought the show. A total of 18.74 million people tuned in to see an episode of The Trouble with Mr. Bean. Among the world's most watched comedic programs, it quickly rose to the top. It was funny enough that they didn't require an English dictionary. All boundaries were shattered by the physical comedy. Still, there was a darker side to all that mirth. It was painful for Rowan. He spoke clearly about how much he hated being Mr. Bean. The difficulty was high. He was completely depleted. He described the weight of responsibility as oppressive and admitted that he frequently anticipated its completion. Since the character hardly spoke at all, Rowan had to rely on his facial expressions and body language to convey everything. It was emotionally taxing. The man behind what the world thought was simple comedy was actually going through a very painful performance. Mr. Bean finally got his big screen debut in 1997. Bean earned almost $251 million globally. Foreign markets contributed almost $205 million to that total. With $3.1 million, it debuted at #1 in Australia. It made $2.5 million in its first weekend, shattering all previous records. Over 12 million German marks were made on its first weekend there. It became the fastest UK movie to reach $100 million even before releasing in the United States. However, Rowan felt even more exhausted as a result of all that success. He was already struggling with the character, and now the world wanted more of it. The answer came to him in 2002. He started Mr. Bean, the animated series. It began on March 2nd and ran until November 1st, 2004. The show had 52 episodes. His format was a relief. Rowan only had to do the voice. No more physical work. The show became popular with children and moved to CYTV. It introduced new characters and stayed true to the original. The animated version kept Mr. Bean alive without hurting Rowan's health. The series kept running, and by 2024, it was still being made. In 2012, Rowan brought Mr. Bean back for one more live performance during the London Olympics. He acted out a comedy bit during Chariots of Fire, and 26.9 million people in the UK watched it. Globally, 900 million people saw it. It was one of the most tweeted moments of the night. But the performance took a big toll on Rowan. It left him drained for weeks. Many people now see that moment as his last major appearance as Mr. Bean in full physical form. Mr. Bean found love on set. During the late 80s, Rowan Atkinson initially crossed paths with Sunetra Sastry. On the BBC show Blackadder, she worked as a makeup artist. In order to strike up a conversation with her, Rowan really changed cosmetic artists. Since Stephen Fry, who co-starred with him, had also intended to ask her out, this quietly saddened him. But Rowan arrived ahead of schedule. They wed at New York's Russian Tea Room on February 5, 1990, after falling madly in love. One of his closest associates was Stephen Fry. They were parents of 2 kids apiece. They welcomed a son, Benjamin, in 1995, and a daughter, Lily, in 1993. Their relationship lasted for 24 years. However, 2014 was the turning point. In that year, Sunetra and Rowan broke up. November 2015 was the final month of the divorce. Sunetra stated in court that Rowan's behavior was unreasonable. Concurrently, Rowan had discreetly begun an affair with a somewhat younger lady named Louise Ford. The news was filled with headlines, and Sunetra was devastated that someone so young had taken her place. March 2001 was a terrible moment for Rowan. His private pilot passed out while he and his family were in the air over Kenya. Rowan seized the controls, and kept the plane steady despite his lack of experience flying. He persisted until the captain regained consciousness and the jet touched down safely in Nairobi. At the time, Rowan was 46 years old. In that instant, the guy behind Mr. Bean revealed something no one had anticipated. In actuality, he maintained composure and rescued all individuals. Even though he doesn't dwell on it much, the flight nearly ended in disaster if he hadn't reacted so quickly. Many were taken aback by Rowan's address in Parliament in October 2012. The topic was the right to free expression. He defended the freedom to say things, even if others find them insulting, for 9 minutes. He advocated for free speech and argued that many things are deemed objectionable. With over 140,000 views in a matter of days, that speech became viral. However, he did not have universal support. His opponents in the LGBTQ+ community and the progressive movement accused him of shielding bigots from punishment. However, legislation did evolve. The portion of the Public Order Act that forbade the use of derogatory language was repealed. There was a realization that Rowan wasn't merely a comic. When he thought about anything, he didn't hesitate to say it. Rowan started dating again in 2013 while performing in a play titled Quartermain's Terms. His age was 58. His 31-year-old co-star was Louise Ford. To be with Rowan, she broke up with her boyfriend, comedian James Acaster. Many individuals found their 27-year age gap scandalous. Not long after Rowan's breakup with Sunitra in 2014, the news began to circulate. Both fans and reporters were very critical of them. However, Rowan chose not to mention it. He once claimed that, other than keeping quiet about one's private life, there is nothing more important. Isla was born to Louise and her husband in December 2017. Rowan had another child at the age of 62. People had always assumed that Rowan was on the side of the environment. His advocacy for climate change and his use of electric and hybrid vehicles date back to the 1980s. But in June of 2023, he shocked everyone with a piece he penned for The Guardian. "I was an early adopter of electric vehicles and enjoy them, but I feel swindled more and more often." Compared to conventional automobiles, he claims that electric vehicles produce 70% more greenhouse gas emissions during production. Electric vehicle batteries were his target. Fox Business and other conservative news outlets ran with that article. Claiming that his statements were deceptive, environmentalists were enraged. Then word got out that Rowan had an extensive collection of exotic vehicles, including some very rare models like Aston Martin and McLaren. Even lawmakers in the UK legislature pointed fingers at his piece for the decline in EV sales. Even though he led an extremely carbon-intensive lifestyle, his detractors claimed he benefited fossil fuel businesses. Rowan turned down the part of Zazu in Disney's 1994 The Lion King production. One of the most iconic aspects of the picture was his voice, which he had always despised, but he consented nonetheless. All throughout the globe, The Lion King made $968.5 million. For Disney, it was the pinnacle of hand-drawn filmmaking success. His Zazu performance was a smashing success, despite the fact that he didn't use his singing voice. Even without him, the 2019 version grossed $1.6 billion. People were sad that he was gone. In a peculiar twist of fate, he ended up with his greatest professional victory after doing something he really disliked: the shocking reappearance. Rowan made a surprising confession on The Graham Norton Show in 2018. The shoot, he claimed, was incredibly taxing and challenging. It seemed that no matter what he did, it was never good enough. He informed The Telegraph in 2012 that he intended to retire Mr. Bean. He mentioned that it can be disheartening to see an adult in their 50s behaving like a toddler. However, he reconsidered in 2016 and declared he would never let the persona go. Then, in 2018, he changed his mind again and indicated that Mr. Bean probably won't be back. But you can't say never. His inability to shed the persona that catapulted him to fame surprised fans, but it revealed his strength as an artist. Rowan felt the strain and exhaustion that came with Mr. Bean, even though he gave joy to millions. Rowan made a triumphant return to physical comedy in 2022 with the Netflix series Man vs. Bee. His character, Trevor, was a homesitter who was attempting to exterminate a single bee. 10 to 20 minutes were the running times of each of the 9 episodes. Filming was tough for him, even if it appeared to be joyful. Actor Rowan, now 67 years old, was performing exploits reminiscent of his time as Mr. Bean. He claimed that even filming a bike scene in his earlier film, Mr. Bean's Holiday, rendered him physically and mentally drained. He came clean about the fact that he had never been athletic. A throwback to his earlier work, Man vs. Bee served as a sobering reminder that his physical limitations had finally caught up with him. It was Rowan's 70th birthday on January 6, 2025. For nearly 45 years, he had been bringing joy to people from his hometown of Newcastle upon Tyne. The internet went abuzz with his birthday celebration. While many expressed their best wishes and shared their favorite video, others pondered when he may retire. Physical comedy becomes more challenging with age, as Rowan himself has stated previously. The idea of reducing his pace appeared to be more appealing to him. For some, this seemed like the perfect opportunity to bid farewell to Mr. Bean for good. Over 35 million people had subscribed to the official Mr. Bean YouTube channel by September 2025, and the number of views had surpassed 12 billion. Its monthly revenue ranged from $77,000 to $232,000. From 1.5 million to 2.3 million people watched it daily. From Sao Paulo to Mumbai to Tokyo, the character garnered admirers worldwide. Some comedians, including Sacha Baron Cohen, have even claimed that Mr. Bean was an inspiration. Nowadays, students learn a technique known as the Atkinson method in comedy schools. It was a universally accessible silent comedy. Rowan was dubbed the Charlie Chaplin of the 21st century by many. He transcended his role as a mere British actor. A worldwide icon he became. A Mr. Bean fan theory was validated in September 2024. Many thought he was an extraterrestrial being for a long time. In the cartoon episode Double Trouble, that theory was proven to be correct. Within a spacecraft, Mr. Bean encounters carbon copies of himself. Screen Rant said that the program has formally acknowledged his extraterrestrial origin. He was teased right from the start of the first series. A Latin chorus proclaiming, "Behold the man who is a bean, plays as a bean descends from the sky." As if aliens had no concept of human names, he was simply known as Mr. without a first name. Although Rowan had dropped hints about it in 1993, it was now integral to the plot. Upon learning the reality, fans were both astonished and excited. The impressiveness of Rowan's award record belies his self-doubt. Among his 18 nominations, 12 were for major honors, and he has won 12. He took home 2 awards that year, one from Rowan Atkinson in review, and one from the British Academy Film Awards for Not the 9 O'Clock News. His 1990 performance in Blackadder Goes Forth was nominated for Best Light Entertainment Performance. His 1991 to 1994 run at the BAFTAs was boosted by 4 nominations for Mr. Bean alone. A global Emmy was also bestowed to him. Rowan insists he isn't successful despite everything. He is always doubting himself. However, among his legion of devoted followers, his status as one of the all-time greats is beyond dispute. Thanks for watching. If Rowan's journey inspired you, hit that like button. And if you love true stories about people who rise against the odds, make sure you subscribe. There are many more untold journeys waiting for you. See you in the next one.